Hey, and welcome to the Linking Souls podcast, the place where we talk about our relationship with animals and different perspectives. I'm your host, Rosina, artist, philosopher, and leader of an animal sanctuary. And today I want to talk about my cow family, our story, and the reasons behind the decision to move them to another place. So here we go! Right now, I'm in the middle of moving my cows away from this place. And I'm not sure if any of you are up to date about how this decision happened. But it feels really important for me to talk with you about that, because even if you might not be aware of it, you're actually a big part of this. And yeah, therefore I thought I would just give you a little update, and in order to make everything as understandable as possible, I decided to go back in time and just share the story of how I ended up with 7 cows and no winter shelter. So I don't know, most of you you've probably heard it at some point, because I've talked about it several times already. I bought the very first cow, Millie, on my 15th birthday, which is now almost 11 years ago, and I bought her pretty spontaneously. I might go into details about the story at some point, but the short version is I was working at a dairy farm in the form of a school project at that time, and I fell in love with Millie, and when I heard that she was about to be sold to a fattening farm, I bought her when she was 2 weeks old. And guys, I'm so tired. I've been working so much lately. So yeah, I bought her. Basically, I knew that she would be sold on a Thursday. On the Thursday, I firstly convinced my parents that I had to buy that cow. On Friday, I convinced the farmer that I had to buy that cow and that he really wanted to have her stay on the farm and me pay for it, because at first I had her on that farm and I paid every month for her to be there, and partly I paid it in form of money and partly I worked for the farmer in order to afford that. So I convinced him to start this project with me on Friday. And on Sunday, I bought Millie. So it went super quick. It wasn't that much of a surprise because I already wanted to have a cow for a few years before that, but it also definitely wasn't planned, and I was really young and just ready to give my all to this project, and I did ever since. But it wasn't really closely planned, and I had no real option that really suited my wishes and needs, because of course it wasn't my wish to keep her on that farm, and out of the wish to one day be able to have her with me, I actually bought the second cow, Molly, of course, also because she was just absolutely adorably cute and I couldn't stand the thought of her being brought into a fattening farm. But the reason why I could convince my parents that it would be a real good idea to buy a second cow when I was 16 is because I told them, I really want to have my cow with me, and one day I want to have her at home with me, and in order to do that I need a second cow. So they allowed me to buy another cow, and then the third one followed only 1.5 years later, which was Ursus, when I had just turned 18, and I totally fell in love with this little boy, who of course also was supposed to go into a fattening farm. And this time I did not spend that much time convincing my parents, because I was like, okay, I'm 18, I can do whatever I want. And I bought that calf, but the farmer was not willing to keep him as well. He was okay, but you can't just keep buying animals and stuff my barn full with animals that won't ever produce milk. I cannot afford to give you that much space. So if you want to have the third calf, you gotta find a new place. So that's what I did. Again, pretty spontaneously, because I had not planned on buying a third cow when I fell in love with Ursus. This decision was absolutely made hard overhead. So at that time, as I told you, I was just 18, and my parents had saved some money for me and also for my other siblings for when we turn 18. And in my case, it was about 2,000 euro. They had saved that for me, and I took that money and invested that into a little shed or a little shelter that I built up on our yard. I got like 100 square meters of space from my dad that I was allowed to use for the cows. So I took all my money, built up that shed, and got the cows to me. I got them here, and I was super happy. But we ended up drowning in mud, like, totally. I had absolutely underestimated that. Like, this was the winter shelter. I at that time had already rented, or like I got the pasture from my neighbors, which was like about 2.5 hectares. And then I had this 100 square meter with a shed here on our yard, and it was just a little meadow. And when I put the cows there, it was February. I picked up the girls, got them here, Millie and Molly, and they totally destroyed this place. Like, the mud got up to 50 centimeters deep. It was horrible. I had so absolutely underestimated that. It was really shocking to me. So the next summer, I borrowed, I guess it was 2,500 euro from a family friend, with a plan to secure the ground with gravel and build a drainage in order to get the water away from the shed. And yeah, I had a professional person doing that for me, and yeah, I made this investment and thought like, okay, now I've got solved this issue. But it wasn't solved. The first winter with a new setup was of course better than the first winter without any real setup, but we still, like, the water was just, the drainage couldn't catch enough water, and the water was flowing into the shed. It was really difficult. But from there on, every year I just tried to make some improvements. I tried several different approaches, and it just didn't really get better. Of course, it wasn't that helpful that I kept adding more and more cows, but just the basement of this structure didn't really seem to work. And then in 2020, I made the last attempt. I was like, okay, I gotta make a big change. So I started a crowdfunding, and I got about 2,500 euro from you guys. But that was not enough, of course, so I had to borrow money, and at that time I borrowed 6,000 euro. And I was really hoping to be able to finally, like, make the breakthrough to build a structure that would last and truly work for us. At that time, I already had 7 cows. I bought them all head heart over head, not the other way around. Resources were always tight. At the time, I was already self-employed. My monthly income was often, like, on average, it was at about 500 euro. So I was really struggling. But it was always just enough to survive for all of us. And it was really hard. I remember that time was especially financially really tough. I had so much to do, but so little money, and yeah, it was hard. But then we got kind of a lot of money through you and through the money I borrowed. And I did a lot. I also got some help. We renewed the drainage, and yeah, I bought a lot of paddock plates in order to secure the ground, like much more ground. And I don't even remember everything we did, but it was a lot. It was a lot. I have to admit that not all of the 6,000 euro went into that project. It only was about 3,500 because my goat Pepino, he got really severely sick that year, and I paid about 2,000 euro for the vet bills. And then, as I told you, I was financially really struggling, so some of the money just got into other projects like food and stuff like that. So, yeah, just the general cost of living got a little bit from that. But overall, I can definitely say that I invested well about, I guess, a little more than 10,000 euro into this winter shelter on our yard over the years. But even with the last big investment, it didn't went well. The improvements lasted probably until mid-January, and then we started to drown in mud again. And when I talk about drowning in mud, I really mean it. Like, so much that when it was raining, the insides of the sheds were just like there was water standing there. And like it was so wet, I could try to clean and clean and clean, and I was cleaning for several hours every day and never would even get anything close to dry and clean, except from when the weather was dry. Then it was that was fine. But in the winter over here, we don't have a lot of dry weather. We mostly have rain and mud because it's not often freezing enough, and it's also just not dry. It's really cold and wet, and it just went absolutely not well. So the summer after that, I accepted that I won't be able to make this place into a functional winter shelter. It's just because the place is downhill towards the shed, so the water is always flowing down into the shed, and it is super little space for that many cows. And even though over time I got a little more, so in the end I had about 300 square meters, so it was a little more, but it was just not enough to make that happen with the resources I had. So, and also what is also a problem is that the place is really difficult to reach with any bigger machines like a tractor or anything. It is somehow possible, but it's really complicated, and so it didn't really seem to work. And there was so much money that went into this place, and I just couldn't make it work in a way that was functional because I was spending so many hours cleaning and shoveling poop and crap and mud, and we were still drowning in it. Also, I had no place to bring the dung of the cows, so I had collected it here on the farm, but we can't keep it here. So I used to be able to bring it to my neighbors, but that wasn't possible anymore, and it just the whole situation wasn't functional at all. So the summer after that, I decided that I will have to find a new place for the cows for the winter. I was never planning on bringing them anywhere else for the whole year because I've got a really beautiful pasture here, and I've got about 2.5 hectares that I could always have, and then I could sometimes bring them to other pastures next to that when my neighbors had already cut the grass and didn't need the rest anymore. So I had a lot of beautiful opportunities here, and I was never ever planning on bringing them away. So I was looking for a place for winter, and I looked for many months. Of course I talked to basically all the farmers all around here, and then I made online so many ads and asked at so many places, and I ended up looking at a few places and talking to many people, but it was very difficult to find something that was even close to suiting our needs. And most places were just a dark little barn somewhere, and it was just not suiting the needs of a herd of cows, and also not me. And most of the places were very far away. The closest ones were at about 60 kilometers away. Some were 80, 90 or 100 kilometers away, and I was really struggling. I was, there was one place about 60 kilometers away that in some ways suited us, but I just didn't feel comfortable with the person who was offering it. And I had some insecurities because there they were supposed to be outside the entire winter without a shelter. But I had very little trust into the fences there, and I felt like my cows would escape probably, and it would be so far away, and it was just, I don't know, the whole situation was not the right one. It was difficult. I kept looking, and then I don't know, in November I think, someone reached out to me that was close to this place, about 10 kilometers away, and he offered a place to the cows. And the most positive about this was that it was close to us, and the man who offered it was really nice. I definitely liked him, and I felt like I could trust him. And it was very cheap. It was very cheap. He even took less than what I offered. I thought about, I think I wanted to pay €700 a month, and he said he could do it for $630. So that was extremely cheap. That was really cheap. But it was also just a barn, closed with no open windows really, not just entirely closed. And it was about 70 square meters of space for 7 cows. That's really little. So I said yes to that, and I brought them there. But only because I had no other real option. And I kind of thought that at least it would be close and I could visit them often, and there was a small little pasture that he agreed to, that I could bring them out there sometimes when the ground is frozen. So we did that. But we were all so unhappy at that place. There was so little space, and it got dirty so quickly. Because it wasn't only, at that moment I pretty much realized that it wasn't only the water that made it so difficult at the shelter at this place here at home. It wasn't only the rain flowing into the shelter. It's just 7 cows are making so much poop and pee. And there was definitely no rain coming into the barn, but it was so, the straw got so dirty and so wet, it was horrible. So the cows actually ended up being dirtier than ever before. And I had a very hard time to just go there, because I felt so uncomfortable at that place. I didn't really like the energy of that place, which was an old pig farm, where there was an industrial pig farm in there. I just didn't feel comfortable at that place, and seeing my cows in these conditions at that place just made my heart break. It was so hard to face it, and I visit them, of course, I don't know, sometimes twice a week, and sometimes, I know once I did not see them for 4 weeks because I went to Sweden, which was one of the positive aspects of that, because they were fully taken care of at that place. And I could go to Sweden. I'm super grateful for that. But then I caught COVID, and I in total did not see them for 4 weeks. Yeah. So it was really hard, and in these entire 4 months they only got outside on that pasture for, I guess it was 3 times, to play around and run. Because it wasn't really frozen ever, the ground was, we've not had enough frost, and I wasn't there often enough, and I don't know, it just didn't went well, and the cows really, they were so dirty, dirtier than ever before, and their claws got super long, and they lost a lot of muscles, and I could just feel that it wasn't good for them to be there, being forced into this tiny space for 4 whole months. Yeah. That wasn't the right thing. So the next summer I got them here back to our pasture in April, and I think in May I started to search for a new place again, and I asked more people and wrote more ads in the internet. I don't know if you say that, ads. Like, just I asked for a place online, on eBay, and yeah, just asked around a lot. But this year it was even harder. I hardly ever got offered anything. I also I think that I raised my standards lately, being like, okay, no, I need more than just a barn. But we couldn't really find anything. So the only option that I had left was bringing them back to that barn, which I did not want, or keeping them here outside on the pasture. And that is what I chose. I decided to keep them out on the pasture without a shelter, only with the bushes and the trees, and with the emergency option to bring them into that barn from last year. So that was our last winter. And I can say it was really challenging, but better than any other former shelters, because the cows had space to move, trees to scratch themselves, they had stuff to do, they were not so horribly bored, and they could deal with a cold pretty well. Like, there was not one day where I felt like they were really struggling with that. The mud was partly really difficult, and still is, because it is still extremely muddy in most places, not all of them, but in many places. But in general, the cows did fantastic. It was hard, but it was absolutely doable. And it was also, I'm really glad that I could do it. It was hard, especially at some point we had so much snow that I had to, I couldn't get there with a car. I often, most of the time, I couldn't get directly to the pasture with a car, and I had to carry the water very far, very often. But for 3 days, there was so much snow that I had to pull the water over the snow to the pasture from our house, which is 1 kilometer. And that was a lot. I always took 50 liters of water and pulled them on a sled to the cows for 1 kilometer through the forest. That was exhausting. But it was also empowering. I've been sick once, and then I actually got help. At some point the car broke down. Oh god. Yeah, there I got also a lot of help from my friend Isabel, and when I was sick I also got help from my brother Mio. So there were a lot of challenges, but we just made it through. The pasture really, it wasn't really that good for the pasture. There's not much grass left now on the other side of winter, but I think it's okay. And if it would only be to the challenges that we experienced so far, I would probably do it again and try to do some things better and change to this and that. But in general, I would redo it. I'm recording this podcast episode during the day for the very first time. I've never done that with anything, no voiceover of my videos or any podcast episode, because there are so many noises. So if you hear strange noises, the dogs are barking and all that kind of stuff, this is just how it sounds like in the days over here. As some of you might remember, I asked for money in the beginning of the last winter in order to buy a tent, because my idea, of course, was not to keep the cows outside without any form of shelter, even though I knew that they would be capable of doing it, because I do know several farmers in Germany that do it like that. And I also have a friend in Canada who has her cows outside all year round without a shelter, so I knew that it was possible, but I would not have prioritized that. So I wanted to buy a new tent for the cows. There are these big tents that are made out of metal and stuff like that, so they are really stable and made for horses or cows as shelters. And I've got one of them, or I've got two, but one of them is now, the pigs need that. So I wanted to buy a third one and use two of them for the cows on the pasture. And I had planned all of that out. I had found people who were ready to support me in building up the tent. And I asked for money, and you guys were amazing because you sent me 2,000 euro, which was wonderful. And I felt really happy about that. And I had talked to my neighbors from whom I get the pasture, and they were like, okay, you do whatever you want. But right before, like, I had already planned everything out, and then one of them said, like, I should talk to another neighbor from another village. And I was like, I wasn't even knowing why I should talk to them. I only knew that the field next to my pasture belonged to that farmer. So I was like, why would he be bothered by me putting up a tent on my pasture? But I asked him and talked to him, and I figured out that he actually is the actual owner of the land I was on. My neighbors are renting the land from him, and they're offering me the opportunity to be there because they don't need that part of the pasture because you can't drive there with any sort of machines or anything. So, yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Even after 8 years of using that pasture, I had no idea whom it belonged to. And sadly, it turned out that that farmer was not okay with me putting up a tent there. So, I could not build it. And I had the money and I had the plan, but I had no way of making that real. So that was difficult, especially because there were a lot of other difficulties that just suddenly got up to the surface of like the general situation was suddenly questioned, and it wasn't clear if we could stay here or not. And that insecurity started in January, like it got really intense there actually. Before it was already a little, but not that much. And that was super stressful because I had no idea what the future would bring and if we would have to leave or not. And yeah, it was really stressful, and I just took it one day at a time and waited. And in February, another neighbor sent me an eBay ad of a place that was out to be rented, a barn with a huge pasture about 45 kilometers away from us. And because I had no idea if we could stay here or not, I went there and looked at it, even though that I had not really thought about anything like that, but I just went there, looked at it. It was beautiful, but also really overwhelming. And just the thought of this kind of project just made me feel like super challenged. And I thought about it for a few days, but I realized I can't say yes to something like this right now, because even though I felt like our time here was running out, I also I couldn't just say no to this place. I felt like I didn't actually want to leave. Not like that. So I promised to that man who was offering that place to make a choice until April. And in March, I tried everything I could think of to find an opportunity to stay here. That included even thinking about buying a farm here in the village. And a lot of talking to a lot of different people, really trying to find some sort of a winter shelter here so that I could keep the pasture, and also trying to solve the conflicts that were with the owner of the land, and that was actually quite successful. So he absolutely agreed to us staying there under some we would have to change some things, like I had to cut many of the bushes because he wants to have a lot of grassland there, and he doesn't want it to become more of a forest. I personally really like foresty areas, but it was really important for him to cut back the bushes, and I should not be singing that much because I was disturbing the hunters in the area. Like, I'm not sure how many hunters actually, just one of them complained about it. But yeah, I would have to rearrange that, and I mean, that is not comfortable for me, but it is totally okay, and we could have found a solution for that, but he was not willing to offer us the opportunity to stay there during the winters. And that was just clear for me, like, if I don't have a place to stay in winter, I cannot stay on this pasture during the summer, because, yeah, that's only 50% of the year. And at the end of March, I felt so confused, because even though there was no real yes, like I couldn't really find a good opportunity, it was just so difficult, and there was no clear no. It wasn't like there's no way we can stay here, but it was like there's no good way to stay here. It's not really the right choice anymore. So I drove to that place because I had said that I would make a choice until April, and I wasn't sure. I had no clear choice while I was driving there. But the moment that I arrived, I could feel a yes. I was always looking for a clear no at this place, because I thought, like, if I would get a clear no from this place, it would be so much easier to let go and start something new. But I did not really get that no. It was more like a maybe if you're working really hard. And I wasn't sure if I would be ready to work really hard for this place anymore. I wasn't sure. Partly I wanted to do anything and everything, and partly I was just so tired of it. So I did not get the no from this place, but I got the yes from the new place. I could just immediately feel it. I could feel it in the way I was greeted by the man who was renting that place. I could just feel that he really wanted me to come. Not just to drink a cup of coffee, but he really wanted to have someone just like me who would just have a bunch of cows on his land who will eat the grass so that he does not need to worry about that anymore. And yeah, I said yes. I agreed to that. I said yes. That was on the 2nd day of April. Now is the 22nd. 20s? I don't know how to say that. 22s? So 20 days ago. And since then, I've been really busy. So the new place has a big barn. I'm renting, I think it was about 180 square meters of that barn. And right next to that barn are 2 hectares of a pasture. And the plan so far is to have that place during winter, and the cows will have the 2 hectares and the barn during winter. On these 2 hectares, there's also a little river, like a tiny river, where they can drink out if it's not frozen. I'm curious how that will go. But yeah, there's also, in some places the ground is already secured with beton, like with stones. In some places I will have to do some improvements, but I have a lot of paddock plates, so I will be able to make some changes. Oh god, I'm tired. But yeah, it has a much better infrastructure than I've ever had. There's place to store the hay and a place to get rid of the dung, and yeah, it's just like a much better infrastructure. But then there's also the summer pasture, and the summer pasture is bigger than all the land I've ever had at this place. The maximum space that I had at this place was about 5 hectares. The summer pasture on our new place is 6 hectares. So, and the 5 hectares here, I never had them all open at once. But there I will have 6 hectares that I can just entirely open up. It's pasture, it's forest, it's bushes. It's only been used with sheep. There has no been like strong human impact. Like the plants are super diverse. There are so many flowers and all different kinds of, like, it's of herbs and everything. Like, it's so diverse and nourishing and beautiful. It's wonderful. It's exactly what I want. And there are some complications, like I will have to bring the cows there walking like 1 kilometer with a road in between, and there's some fields, but all of that will be doable. I'm really sure about it. And this summer pasture is so wonderful and so delicious, and it's right next to a forest. So if I will be able to find people who are able to go on hikes with me, I might even be able to go on hikes with the cows there. And there's another pasture, a third pasture, with about 2 hectares in another direction. I will probably have to part-time separate the herd in order to bring like 2 cows on the other pasture, but I think that will be great, because I always have like sometimes it's just good for some cows to be separated, not for social reasons, but more so, for example, Molly, who injured her hip 2.5 years ago. For her, it is also really challenging to be together with the other cows, and I think it would be good for her to have a little break and have this pasture on her own with just one friend. And there's also something else that I'm going to tell you in the end, because there's someone else who might really need that, but for now, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into that. So the plan is that I'm going to continue to take care of the cows, so they are not being taken care of anyone else there. Therefore, I will have to drive there usually about 3 times a week. Because the structure is kind of better than here, I will not need to feed them every day. I will be able to feed them like whole bowls of straw, like these, not straw, hay, like these big portions, so that they will be able to eat for a couple of days. And I really hope that it goes well with just the other people around, that they will have an eye on them and inform me in case of someone is injured or they escape or anything. Like, I'm just hoping that this will go well. Like, it's outside of my control. I can only do my best, but I hope it's going to just go well. And maybe I will find people in the future that will be able to help us and maybe take care of the cows sometimes when I can't or just want to have some free time. But I'm not really planning that right now. So we are in the middle of moving. This is forcing me to expand massively, and because I have to drive there 3 times a week, I need an own car. So far I've always used the car of my parents, because I only had to drive like 1 kilometer back and forth through the forest every day. But now I will need an own car, because it's 45 kilometers of drive, and when I'm there, since I'm not there every day, when I'm there I will need to spend more time there, and I also need to be more flexible, like in case someone calls and they are escaping, I need to be able to just drive there, and maybe the car of my parents is then not here and not available for me, and that would not be a good option. So today I bought a car, and I bought it with the money that you gave me for the tent, and I'm so grateful. It costs exactly 2,000 euro, so exactly as much as you gave me, and I just want to thank you so much, because I'm so happy. I would have never thought that I could be that happy about buying a car, and especially at the beginning, it felt like so horrible. To this whole entire process of trying to buy a car was so stressful, and I was like, I had no idea how to buy a car, and I've generally no idea about cars, and I didn't even have any interest in a car. I was like, I don't even want to have a car. It was just for the cows, and that was actually it is a strong motivator, but it's not strong enough in order to get rid of all the resistance I have inside of me, because I'm not a big fan of cars, even though I am, because they're super practical, but they're not good for the environment, and driving cars is so extremely dangerous, and I don't like that. So I was like, oh my god. And I was looking at cars, and my dad helped me, but it didn't really seem to flow. Like, it felt so uncomfortable also, like, because I don't have that much money, and then I can't go for the super good cars that are super new and everything. I had to find something that was kind of cheap, but cheap cars are really often not in a good, they're not really working that good anymore, and really often people are trying to just get as much money as they somehow can from cars that are actually scrap. And we had like two cases where I felt really uncomfortable, and like, you can't trust these people, and they're trying to sell you something that isn't really reliable and isn't really safe, and that feels so bad if you only have like, if you're like giving your all, everything you have, because I kept that money the entire winter. It was so hard because I had so little money, and sometimes I was struggling so much not to touch that money, and I just kept it. And it felt really good because I always knew, okay, in an emergency, I've got 2,000 euro. That's so wonderful. But it was really hard sometimes not to use it. And it felt like, this is my all and everything that I'm now giving for this car. This is all my backup. And then feeling like you can't really trust the people, and they might just sell you something that isn't really worth your all and everything. That felt so scary and uncomfortable. And then it happened like totally magically that a former colleague of mine, that even is probably a little more than a colleague because I really have a deep heart connection to her, and she was one of the very few people that I liked to work together with when I was in my training to become an educator. I really liked to work with her. And from an absolute coincidence, I ended up at her doorstep one evening, and I told her that I'm looking for a car, and actually she's driving a Citroen Berlingo, which is the exact sort of car that I kind of felt like I would want to buy, because they have some practical, positive, like they're just pretty much suiting my needs, but also because I really like them, because I used to drive with her to work, and I really like to drive with her. And because last winter I borrowed the car of another neighbor who has a Citroen Berlingo, and I drove with that car to my cows pasture. And I really liked driving that car, and I felt like, okay, this is the kind of car that is functional and I like it, and something like that would be perfect. And I told her that I'm looking for a car, and she said, oh, my ex-partner, he's just about to sell his car. And it is a Citroen Berlingo. And I can tell you, like, it was so magical, because it is exactly the kind of car that I need. Because it has, in the front it only has 2 seats, and then the back part is a big space where you can put like all the working material, and I even can fit in a mattress. I will get a mattress with that car so that I can sleep in that car. And it's just like super functional, and the man who now sold it to me, he is a car mechanic, so he did everything himself with the car. He knows everything about the car. He is super nice, and just, it was like a match made in heaven. Like, it did cost exactly the amount of money that I had. I now have someone who is happy to answer my stupid car questions in case there are any problems. I don't hope so, but I can really fully trust him. I totally feel like, yeah, I'm feel super safe with that, and I'm so happy. So today I bought the car, and on Tuesday I will be able to pick it up. And I just wanted to tell you that because you are the ones who paid for that car. So I'm so grateful, and that is a big milestone. But there still is so much work to do. I've already built down or teared down a lot of fence here. But there is so much more to go, and I've already started to build the fence for the first pasture there. But there's so much more to go. In total, I have about 2.5 kilometers of fence to tear down, and about 3 kilometers of fence to build up there. So I will also have to buy more fencing material. I have to transport everything, organize everything, also with the people who come here to support us. It's a lot. It is a lot. And I just realized, like, I would not have been able to do this a few years ago, or like I would not have dared to do it. I can really like feel how I've changed. I feel it because there are like 2 things that used to be like the biggest challenges for me. One of them is driving a car, because I never enjoyed it. It was so hard for me to learn it. I only did it because I needed a way to transport the water for my cows through the forest. That was my main motivation to get a driver's license, and I never wanted to own a car because, yeah, that's just I don't know, totally outside of my comfort zone. And I used to be so scared of driving. I would used to be so scared of driving far distances. I used to be so scared of driving on roads that I don't know, and it just was really challenging for me. And the other thing is trusting people and new places. This is something big for me. Like, I really, yeah, I have a lot of trust issues with humans, and I used to always try to be at home as much as possible and rely on others as less as possible. And that just, even if I did it and I found a way to somehow do it, it just triggered a lot of stress for me. And it is definitely challenging me right now, but I can just feel that the last couple of years of deep healing have changed things. And I feel like I'm able to differentiate between a real threat and internal stressors. So that makes such a big shift that I used to, like, every little thing when I was driving, everything, the tiniest difficulty, anything going differently than planned would always stress me so much. And right now I feel like I'm really able to continue to think clearly, even if things might be a little challenging and maybe it's a bit difficult to get, like, I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, just I don't know, if it just feels a little challenging to drive sometimes, and I used to get so stressed by that, and by now I'm not anymore. I'm totally okay if I'm driving too slow and other people are coming too close from the back and trying to drive around me and stuff. Like, that used to stress me, like, so horribly. And now it's just like, okay, let them do their thing. I'm gonna do my thing, and it's all fine. I'm so much calmer with everything, and also with the humans. I haven't met that many people at that place. Only Alexander, the man from whom I rent the place, and one of his neighbors. But I can just feel like I used to be so stressed by just meeting anyone new, and right now I feel like I can really clearly see them, and I can really clearly see that it's okay. And that's so wonderful, but I'm still really pushed to my limits in every way. And actually, currently the biggest stressor of all is one that I haven't fully processed yet, where I'm not really able to fully see how big of a difficulty that will be, but it could be a real big one. And that is that yesterday, my oldest cow, Millie, she just turned 11, and yesterday she injured herself. And I don't know yet how bad it is. It could be that it looks a lot worse than it actually is, but I can't really tell right now. And I'm actually scared that she probably also broke her hip bone, like Molly did. Molly broke that 2.5 years ago, and in her case it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. But Millie has the same symptoms. It doesn't look as bad as it was with Molly, but it looks very similar. And this is, like, it is not the worst thing that could happen, because it doesn't mean that she is dying of it. Like, she can still walk, and it can heal in some way, but it won't ever really get healthy again if it is actually that. And that is really shocking for me, because yeah, it's not deadly, but it will definitely shorten her life expectancy. And there are a lot of things that we won't be able to do anymore, because she won't be able to. Yeah, you guys know my actual dream is to one day move to Sweden, and I have this vision of one day hiking with my cows through Sweden for several months. Like, I would love to go on a hike for a whole summer. And Millie was always one of the cows that were so important for this dream, and she was one of the cows I really, really wanted to have with me when I'm finally able to do this. And I could just see her in this, and she's so important for me. And especially her wild nature, I just love it so much.
And now I just don't know if that will ever be possible. I don't know how this will develop and if it will heal and which way it will heal. I don't know right now. And that is really challenging. And I also don't know how that will impact our current moving process, because it was actually planned to move in 1 week from today. And I don't know if she will be ready to be transported. And right now I just know very little, except from there's a lot to do, and I will try my very, very best to just do it in the best way possible. But yeah, it's challenging me, and right now I just feel again, like, as I said, I haven't fully processed this realization that this actually happened with Millie. I just feel it now coming, flooding over me, being like, oh my god. All the stress with the moving feels like nothing compared to that. But yeah, we will see, and maybe, I really hope that maybe I'm wrong, and she just, I don't know, did something, I don't know the English words for whatever. But I just hope it's something that will heal easier. And yeah, I've had many injuries with the cows, and so far everything healed. It's healed entirely, except from Molly's hip injury, which also got okay again. But it's not the same, and I know that it is shortened their life expectancy, because the whole structure, the whole, like, the back is being, like, it's all displaced and different. And yeah, there's very little you can do about it. So yeah, on Monday the vet will come. I've not called him earlier because I know that there will be nearly nothing he can do for her. Also, I can't give her pain medication, in case any one of you is wondering. That is simply because she's out on a pasture right now, and if I would give her pain medication, she would just, like, she wouldn't feel the pain anymore, and then she would probably end up, like, overdoing stuff, like just walking around way too much. I have made very bad experiences with that. Pain medication is not a good idea when it comes to these kinds of injuries. If you don't have a really small space, like if I would have a really small space to put her in, it might be an option, but I don't have that here right now. I would have to transport her to another place, and from my experience, it is better to just wait for a while, and often the cows are able to fix the things very well by themselves. I bring her food and water so that she does not need to walk, but she's free to walk if she wants to. And on Monday the vet is going to be here, and then we will see if we can do anything else. So yeah, even without the vet costs, the whole process of moving the cows is very expensive. And as I told you, like, I actually invested everything I had into that car right now. And I had to borrow some money again in order to be also able to, afford the moving process, which is a lot. Like, even the transportation of the cows alone will be very expensive. And there are a lot of other things, just like the car itself costs €2,000, but then in order to be able to drive it, there are a couple more €100 that have to be paid for all the kind of stuff. And I don't know, I just hope that it will be worth it, and I feel like it will be worth it. And I hope that it will finally offer us a secure base from which we can then grow, hopefully far beyond our current reality. But yeah, if you would like to support us in any way, if you would like to come in person and help me with the work that needs to get done, if you're living in Germany, around the area of Witzenhausen or Göttingen, this is the area where we are working at, please write me a note. If you are living further away and you would like to stay overnight, let me know. We might be able to work something out. Just send me a message. Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, if you're one of our patrons, all of that would work. And if you would like to support us financially, I'm going to put all the important links into the description of this podcast. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. I will try to keep up with this podcast. It is challenging right now, as you can probably think, but I will try to be here again next weekend, and if I don't manage to do that, it's going to be the weekend after that. So I'm looking forward to talk to you soon again, and yeah, bye bye. Take care, everyone.